Well, welcome to a Monday edition of This Week in Crypto with the CoinRoutes team. Sorry for taking off last Friday, but we were scattered to the four winds. But not a whole lot has happened. Actually, more has happened over the weekend as Bitcoin has kind of rallied about 8% since last week. And just talk about the markets in general and what you're seeing. Why don't you start us off, Carl?
Yeah, so not a lot to really get back to on the crypto side. We saw stocks in particular have a fantastic week last week. Most of the indices, the S&P, the NASDAQ, the Dirty 30, those are all approaching all-time highs and sitting around there right now. But as far as crypto goes, it was pretty much a flat week, and same thing over the weekend. We did have some interesting stories. So, Dave, why don't you take us through some of those?
So, I mean, look, the first story that everybody's talking about is still the Bitcoin ETF. And, you know, even I'm tired of it, although I suspect this is kind of an ongoing story with legs pretty much forever. There are two sub-stories here. The first is the flows. And Grayscale, GBTC is down to 21 million from, I guess, 26 or 27 at the peak. And, you know, that outflow, it turns out there was a bunch of forced selling because FTX owned a punch and they sold it, as of the bankruptcy trustee, I guess, sold off that. And that was more than some of the outflows for the early part of last week into the end of last week. That seemed to peter out. The other part of flows that's interesting is the BlackRock ETF is over 2 billion in assets now. Fidelity put hard on their heels, and then there's more. So that's one story. I think that's interesting. I think what might be more interesting though is Bitwise ETF announcing and then doing, telling people the addresses of their holdings, such that unlike any other ETF in the history of humanity, basically in the history of the markets, Bitwise is letting anybody who with a blockchain explorer see exactly what the holdings of their ETF are. Now that is really interesting. So I'm curious what you guys think of that in terms of transparency. I know what my thoughts are, but I kind of think that's a big deal.
Look, I mean, Dave, you and me were talking about this before we started recording the show. And before you have to have someone go evaluate the vault, there's a whole issue with just a person going to do that, what the vault's doing in terms of security, right? This is transparent. It's online. It's easily accessible. And for crypto, it just proves that it's a better product type for an ETF.
I mean, I was joking, Carl. I'm curious what you think. Is compare a gold ETF to a Bitcoin ETF. So now Bitwise lets everybody see what's going on in the public blockchain. If you want to see what's going on in the vault for GLD or IAU or any of these ones, you literally have to get by people with guns, go into a vault, saw open every one of the gold bricks to make sure there's no lead inside, etc. Now, I'm not saying there's lead inside any of those gold bars, but logic dictates that at least one of the gold ETFs is holding some bars that might not be fully, assayed proof gold. Whereas with Bitcoin, that is never an issue. And I think it's kind of funny. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
I think that transparency is always a good thing. It's going to be interesting to see what the other issuers do, because I can imagine that Bitwise is going to see some inflows because of this extra layer of transparency. Yeah, there's incentive for people to know, for them to let people know why and how much Bitcoin they're holding. It was really interesting as I was visiting New York last week, seeing a bunch of our clients. I think that notion that we kind of are going to let the inflows and outflows of each individual issuance, let it kind of settle down before they make decisions on where the price goes. And so once we kind of see where all the outflows land and where things stabilize, it's going to determine what the next 3 to 4 months. And that was kind of the sentiment on Wall Street and the institutional side. And so, yeah, I think as far as what the next few months look like, it's pretty much unknown.
But yeah, I'll tell you what is known. What is known is the marketing has just started. I mean, there was a headline today, another story, actually, didn't think about it. I don't know what you guys think about this. Google now is allowing BlackRock and Fidelity and other Bitcoin ETF issuers to advertise on Google. Now, for those who don't know, Google has kind of stopped or not allowed crypto to be able to advertise. Kind of a big deal if you think about it. I don't know that Google will matter that much in terms of advertising, but I do know that armies of people actively talking to investors is definitely going to matter.
Two things. One, I would go back to Kevin O'Leary's statement, which I agreed with, where this isn't a signal for an ultimate bull run start, but it is a signal of Bitcoin being adopted in the mainstream financial system. It's a positive step. And the second part would be the ETF, like you said, had just started. So marketing teams need to come together with campaigns. They need to have time to get it to market. So I saw an article comparing the outflows of GBTC to the inflows of the ETF. And they're like, oh, it's not a great thing for Bitcoin because the outflows of Grayscale are still greater. But look, these ETFs just started, and it's going to take a while before they fully integrate into everyone's portfolio, but it's nothing but a step in the right direction.
I mean, when you talk about adoption, I was on our Macro Monday podcast, with the Wolf of Wall Streets this morning, and I pointed out this chart. So let's do this. Share screen. We do this live. Let's get this to work. So this is from blockchain.com, but their hash rate chart. So when you look at this, what are you seeing? You see that when Bitcoin hit its all-time high back in November of 21, before all hell broke loose the following year, you were talking about a $64,000 price, give or take, on that day, or $65,000 price, and 165 hash rate. The hash rate more or less represents how much power miners are willing to throw at it. If you look where we are today we're at in the 40s, but the hash rate is at 541. Now, that is a very, very, very big deal, because if you really think about it from a perspective, the way I like to look at it is in stock markets. I really think one of the best indicators pretty much ever is insider buying versus insider selling. When the insiders are buying, that tends to predict a run up in price. And not necessarily immediately, but it will predict, months later run up in price. When the insiders start dumping, on the other hand, expect prices to sell off. Well, the higher hash rate is the ultimate insider tell. It's miners adding the ability to mine. And so, yes, there's some noise with ordinals and other things in the Bitcoin network where miners can make money, but effectively a triple of the hash rate means that a new all-time high in terms of, call it whatever you, exuberance, would be triple the last one. So you'd be talking somewhere between $180,000 and $200,000 is what will be equivalent in this bull run if we got there. Now, I'm not saying we're going to, but I'm saying that everyone who says, well, 40,000 is such a high level, it's like, no, it's not. Because when you divide it by the hash rate, it's much, much less. And so I kind of look at this period of time, and we've been talking about the markets for, every week. And we all know that I think we're sorry. Turn off the volume. We all know that what I think is we're going to be in a range for a bit until we start grinding higher. I don't think nothing has changed over the last 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts?
Look, I think I would completely agree with Bitcoin. It recovered pretty quickly, though, so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a retest of where it was at the peak before the ETF. And I think there's a lot of pent-up liquidity up there, too. So anything's possible. It could retrace all the way up top, take people out, and then resume in the range. We'll see. Alts are just very interesting right now as well. Some are rebounding extremely hard, and probably 60% of the move downwards has been retraced. So interesting to see. BTC has been getting killed, but usually when BTC gets killed, alts do pretty poorly. But in this case, it's getting killed, and some alts are performing well. So interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the two big ones are Solana and AVAX are both up over 20% over the last week, right? And that's, that is interesting. I mean, I don't know which of them will be the ultimate winner. I know there's been some news on Solana apps and whatnot. We don't tend to dive into that level of detail, but I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting to see that. But I wouldn't say ETH BTC has been getting killed. I mean, it's at 50, according to my CoinRoutes screen. It's what, 0.0533 something or other. 0.06 has been when Ether was at the top of the range, and 0.049 is kind of at the bottom. So it's pretty close to the middle of where it's been. I mean, Bitcoin's outperformed over the last week, but I mean, look, at the end of the day, that brings us to the last story that I think is worth talking about. How frustrating is it to people, Carly, that the SEC delayed the Ether ETF application again? Anybody care, or is it just kind of expected at this point?
I mean, they did the same thing with Bitcoin. They're going to push it out. As if they can delay it, they will delay it. right? They did it with Bitcoin. They pushed it out as long as they possibly could, and then they made their decision, which was ultimately an inevitable one, of allowing it to go through. And I think we'll see something similar here with Ethereum, although it is a different kind of question as to whether or not Ethereum's a security versus, you know, something else. But it's something that people are going to talk about. And so what is the new deadline now, Dave?
I think now the last deadline was, there was a one that came out. I think they have another smaller deadline in March and a drop dead date sometime in May, but it's not really a drop dead date because they could get very technical. The thing about Ether that's different is if someone wanted to do an Ether ETF that was just pure, exactly the same way and using the exact arguments as Bitcoin, they could probably do it. But I think the smarter operators know that that's not as good of a product as one where you could actually get staking revenue. And the problem with staking revenue is it sounds a lot more like a security, yada, yada. And so who knows where that will go. I to be blunt, I don't have a clue. I don't want to handicap it yet. I'd say we start talking about this story in March towards May, and we'll see where we are. I think a lot will have to do with who the nominees are, how the election is taking shape, and what deals are made on the side. Because there's a lot that we'll be talking about as far as the election goes on. But, you know, the other story, I guess you could call it a story, is how weird did it sound to you guys to have Donald Trump stand up, having obviously listened to Vivek Ramaswamy, and say there will be no CBDC if he's in the White House, which is the first step toward basically saying, yeah, I kind of get this crypto stuff. We want our economic freedom. That to me, I was stunned when that happened.
I mean, it has to be associated with a conversation he had with someone else lobbying from probably the traditional finance sector. Who know? I mean, Donald Trump has never been outwardly against crypto until now, so it is surprising. And he could be pro crypto, and it would align with all of his other campaign values. So it must be a personal ploy of some sort or a deal he cut, in my opinion.
Look, there's an article in Forbes, I think it was Forbes Crypto, where someone was saying how if he took the next step to become pro Bitcoin, it would be the highest risk reward that he could do. It wouldn't cost him very much and would gain him a lot. And, you know, I have a lot of opinions about Donald Trump, but one thing I do know is he's not a fool and he's a pretty good negotiator. If someone gives him something for free, he's generally going to take it. So it feels like that this is going to become an actual campaign issue because there's some pretty large number. I heard like well over 1 million voters in swing states who own crypto in a meaningful part of their wealth. And that's a lot, right? When you consider how the last election was turned by 100,000 votes across 5 swing states. I mean, you know, maybe 100,000, it's not small. So I don't know about you guys, but it could be that people that are more like your age than my age might be the ones that are the swing votes that will matter the most in this election.
I don't think that him saying he's anti-CBDC means that he's anti-crypto also.
No, there's one thing I know. Pro-crypto. He's pro, right. Clear. He's anti-CBDC, but his reasons in the speech where he doesn't want the government to control the currency. Maybe I didn't make that clear.
And that's why it still kind of aligns with his core values of just small government in general, which is, you know, one of the things that is interesting and will be as we come closer to the election cycle is a lot of the candidates out there are bought by banks. And one thing we know about banks is they do not like crypto. And so that's going to be fascinating to watch over time is who kind of, you know, what their opinions are against the crypto narrative as we get closer.
Well, I agree. Any other stories you guys want to talk about, or should we just talk about predictions? What do you think is going to happen the rest of the week?
I was going to suggest let's go to the latter. I don't have anything else I'd like to cover story-wise.
Look, I think personally, since I was kind of right last week in what I said, I think personally we're kind of stuck in this bottom end of the range. I think that we're going to flop around this 42-ish level, 42 to 43. if something comes out this week from the Federal Reserve that's more accommodative, I wouldn't be surprised to see Bitcoin start to go on a little bit of a run. But otherwise, it could languish. I'm hearing a lot of bearishness out there. People just expecting it to drop into the 30s or below. And whenever I hear that, I want to be contrary. If I start hearing everyone be bullish again, then I would ratchet down my expectations. But for me, it feels like the risk is more on the upside than the down right now. But I still think we are in a range.
Look, I'd love to be bearish. You guys all know that. But I think we see ATH within the next week or two. I think, like you said, I think crypto Twitter has just been so overly bearish. All the wrong traders who've been getting it wrong this entire run are calling for 30K, right? The Bitcoin ETF just got approved. It sold off 10% and immediately recovered. Alts look strong. Coins like Celestia are pumping still for no reason. And nowhere near euphoria, also, in my opinion. The people that I know, once they start asking me and I'll sell, have not even brought it up yet. So waiting for that.
Yeah, that's actually a great top sign.
I mean, I don't have a strong opinion right now. I think things are just too uncertain at the moment, which could be bullish, it could be bearish, and that's why I'm keeping my money out of this space right now. My bets, at least, my short-term bets, yeah, just letting things develop, letting things chop around. I want to see, you know, the inflows and outflows of GBTC stabilize before making any decisions. And I think that a lot of people on the street would agree with that.
Yeah, it feels like we're sort of in that waiting period, kind of like we got the 2 weeks before the Super Bowl. And we're going to hear so much about Taylor Swift over the next 2 weeks. Not about you, but
I mean, how many times do they have to show her during the game? It feels like you're watching her at least 50% of the time.
I don't know. I mean, Flowers was happy that it wasn't only showing him after he did that taunting bullshit. And then the next possession, got the fumble. But we don't want to go there. I would say this: if anyone ever wanted to understand how big of a bitch karma can be in the universe, he understands it. It's the last thing you should ever do.
If there was ever a Super Bowl I didn't want to watch, or I wasn't going to watch, it'd be this one.
Really? I disagree. I don't know. I think it's interesting, but we'll see. I've had Travis Kelce on my fantasy team quite often, 2 out of the last 3 years. So I was happy to see him play well. But there you go. Anyway, let's let everyone get back to their lives. Thanks for watching, and as always, if you have comments, let us know. Subscribe, hit the like button, and we'll be back again at the end of this week.